The first sign that Thanksgiving would be a disaster wasn't the burnt pie crust scent clinging to the air, or the way the November rain lashed against the bay window of my mother's impeccably decorated dining room. It was the silence that fell when I walked in, my two children, Maya and Leo, shuffling nervously behind me. It was a heavy, judgmental quiet, thick enough to choke on. For a heartbeat, the only sounds were the clinking of my sister-in-law's wine glass and the distant, tinny laugh track from the football game in the den. Then, my brother Mark broke it. "Chloe, you made it." He didn't get up from his chair. "Traffic must have been a nightmare from. Where was it you moved to again?" He knew exactly where I lived. The two-bedroom apartment in a decent but not great part of the city was a frequent topic of their pitying conversations. "We made good time," I said, my voice too bright, too brittle. I forced a smile, herding Maya and Leo further into the room. "Look, guys, everyone's here." My mother, Evelyn, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a linen towel. She didn't hug me. Instead, her eyes swept over us, a quick, calculating inventory. She offered a tight, perfunctory smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The turkey's resting. Children, you can put your coats in the guest room." "Not your old room." Never that. It had been redecorated into a home gym within a month of me moving out after the divorce. This was the performance. The annual ritual where I presented my life for their scrutiny, and they, in turn, reaffirmed my place as the family's problem, the cautionary tale. I was Chloe, the almost made it. I'd had the potential, the college degree, the promising start in marketing. But then came the marriage to David, which they'd never fully approved of, and its subsequent, messy collapse when he traded me in for a younger, shinier model from his firm. The divorce left me financially gutted and emotionally raw, a single mother of two, my career stalled from years of trying to balance it all. To my family, my existence wasn't a story of resilience, it was a monument to my own poor choices. For years, I'd played my part. I'd absorbed the backhanded compliments about my parenting. The helpful financial advice that was just a thinly veiled criticism of my budget. The way they tiptoed around the subject of David as if he were a deceased spouse rather than a living, breathing deadbeat who was 3 months behind on child support. I swallowed the bitterness because I thought that's what you did for family. I thought if I was quiet, if I was helpful, if I didn't make waves, they would eventually see me as the capable adult I was forced to become, not the struggling failure they perceived. I was so naive. I'd spent the morning prepping the kids, trying to armor them against the subtle jabs. "Remember, Aunt Sarah is very direct, she doesn't mean anything by it. Grandpa might be quiet, he's just tired." I'd baked a pumpkin pie from scratch, the one thing I could do well, hoping it would be a peace offering. Maya, my sweet, serious 10-year-old, had even used her allowance to buy a small, potted chrysanthemum for my mother. "It's for the table, Mom," she'd whispered, her eyes full of hope. Leo, at 7, clutched a drawing he'd made of our family, just the three of us, holding hands under a rainbow. We took our seats at the long, mahogany table. The conversation was a minefield of their successes. Mark was discussing his latest promotion. Sarah was detailing their upcoming ski trip to Aspen. My father, Robert, held court about his golf handicap. I nodded and smiled, my cheeks aching, contributing nothing of substance because I had nothing they valued to contribute. It was during a lull, as the green bean casserole was being passed, that the first real blow landed. My mother, her gaze fixed on Maya, who was quietly pushing her food around her plate, sighed. "She gets that from you, Chloe. That nervous disposition. You were such an anxious child. It's a shame." She said it so casually, as if commenting on the weather. My fork stilled. I saw Maya's shoulders hunch, a faint pink flush creeping up her neck. Before I could form a response, Mark chuckled. "Well, it's a good thing she has your looks, at least. She'll need them." He winked at Leo, who just looked confused. The air left my lungs. This wasn't the usual, passive-aggressive background noise. This was a direct, targeted strike at my daughter's confidence, at the very core of who she was. The old me would have looked down at my plate, taken the hit, and cried about it later in the bathroom. But something in me, something that had been bending for years, finally felt like it was about to snap. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, buying a second to steady my voice. What exactly do you mean by that, Mark? The table went quiet again. This time, it was a shocked silence. I never pushed back. He blinked, a smug smile playing on his lips. Oh, come on, Chloe. Don't be so sensitive. It was a joke. We all know life is harder for some people than others. Just stating a fact. And that's when I felt it. A tectonic shift deep within me. It wasn't just rage, though that was a part of it. It was a profound, crystalline clarity. I saw the entire dynamic laid bare before me. I was the scapegoat, the one whose perceived failures made their own mediocre successes feel grander. My struggle was the backdrop against their perfect portrait. And they were willing to sacrifice my children's sense of self to maintain that narrative. I looked at Maya's downcast eyes, at Leo's confused frown. I saw the little chrysanthemum, looking pathetically small and out of place next to the lavish floral centerpiece. I saw the years stretching out ahead of us, a lifetime of Thanksgivings, Christmases, and birthdays where my children would be taught to feel small and less than. The switch didn't just flip, it shattered. I carefully placed my napkin on the table. The linen was stark white against the dark wood. Get your coats, kids, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. We're leaving. The uproar was immediate. Chloe, for heaven's sake, my mother hissed. Don't be dramatic. Sit down, my father boomed, his voice the one he used to use when I was 16 and missed curfew. But I was already standing, helping Leo from his chair. Maya looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something else, a flicker of hope. We're not staying where we're not valued, I said, meeting my mother's horrified gaze. And we're certainly not staying where my children are insulted. I didn't wait for a response. I took Maya's hand, she picked up her little plant, and I guided them both out of the dining room, through the foyer, and out the front door into the bracing, clean air of the rainy evening. As I buckled Leo into his car seat, my hands were steady. The performance was over. The landslide that had been building for a decade had finally begun its descent, and I was no longer standing in its path. I was riding it, ready to see what was left when the dust settled. The drive home was a vacuum, filled only by the swish of tires on wet asphalt and the staticky hum of a forgotten radio station. In the back seat, Leo fell asleep almost instantly, emotionally exhausted. Maya, however, was silent, staring out the window at the blurry streaks of passing streetlights. Mom? Her small voice finally cut through the quiet. Are we in trouble? The question was a knife to a heart that was already bleeding. No, baby. No, we are not in trouble. I chose my words with the care of someone defusing a bomb. We left because what Uncle Mark and Grandma said was unkind and untrue. And we don't have to stay where people are unkind to us. Ever. But. It's Thanksgiving, she whispered, the words laden with a confusion that was far too old for her. We can have our own Thanksgiving, I said, the idea forming as I spoke it, a desperate, fledgling thing. With our own rules. We can eat pie first if we want. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips in the rearview mirror. It was the first seed of a new reality. That night, after tucking them in, a process that involved extra-long hugs and reassurances that they were loved, they were wonderful, they were enough, I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. A strange, cold fury had taken root where the hurt used to live. It was a clarifying anger, one that sharpened my focus instead of clouding it. I sat at my small kitchen table, the glow of my laptop illuminating the darkroom, and I opened my banking app. For years, I'd been the family's financial safety net. It had started small after the divorce, covering a portion of my mother's cell phone bill on the family plan because it was easier. Transferring money to Mark when his business was in a temporary cash flow slump, paying for my father's expensive golf club membership one Christmas as a gift they'd all but demanded. I'd told myself it was the least I could do, my contribution to the family since I couldn't offer them the picture-perfect life they valued. I'd been subsidizing my own disrespect. The family account, a joint checking account my father had set up a decade ago for emergencies, was still active. My monthly contributions, a sum that would have covered a full week of groceries and gas for me and the kids, were automatically deducted. They used it as a slush fund for dinners out, for Sarah's salon appointments, for God knows what else. My debit card for it was buried in my wallet, and used. But they spent from it freely. My finger hovered over the screen. For years, the thought of stopping this would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety. What would they say? How would they manage? I'd be the selfish one, the ungrateful daughter. But now, looking at the recent transaction for the Oak Room, the upscale steakhouse I could never afford to set foot in, dated just 2 nights prior, I felt nothing but a steely resolve. I clicked transfer, moved every last cent of my most recent deposit into my personal, private savings account, and then, with one final tap, I clicked close account. A confirmation email popped up instantly. Done. I sat back, waiting for the panic to set in. It didn't. Instead, a profound sense of calm settled over me. This was the first brick removed from the wall they had built around me. The first call came about 20 minutes later. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't call back. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text in the family group chat, aptly named the Core 4. Mark 10 verse 45 p.m. Hey Chloe, Mom's trying to pay for the grocery order for tomorrow and the family card is being declined. Did you get a fraud alert or something? Can you check your app? The audacity was breathtaking. Not are you and the kids okay? Not I'm sorry about what happened. The only thing that mattered was the flow of money had been interrupted. I didn't respond. I silenced my phone and went to bed. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. The next morning, I made pancakes. We had a picnic on the living room floor, watching the Thanksgiving Day parade on TV. We laughed. It was stilted at first, a conscious effort, but it was real. We were building our own tradition from the ashes of the old one. My phone, plugged in on the counter, lit up like a Christmas tree. Missed calls from my father. Voicemails from Sarah, her tone shifting from confused to irritated. A string of increasingly frantic texts from Mark. Mark 11 verse 17 a.m. Chloe, seriously. We need to figure this out. The card is closed. What's going on? Mark 11 verse 35 a.m. Mom is upset. You know how she gets on holidays. Just call her. Mark 12 p.m. Did you close the account? Why would you do that without talking to us? I finally picked up the phone, but not to call them. I dialed the number for my bank's customer service. 30 minutes later, after verifying my identity half a dozen times, I had full transaction records for the family account for the last 5 years. I spent the afternoon compiling them into a spreadsheet, a cold, hard ledger of my exploitation. It wasn't just the money, it was the proof of their entitlement. The climax of their onslaught came around 2 p.m. My personal cell phone rang. It was my father. His voice, usually a lazy, authoritative drawl, was tight with a controlled rage I'd only heard a few times in my life. Chloe, your mother is in tears. We are sitting down to a Thanksgiving meal, or what's left of it, and the entire day has been ruined by your little stunt. Now, I don't know what bug got up your ass yesterday, but this ends now. You will explain to me why you closed that account, and you will transfer the money back immediately. The old Chloe would have flinched. The old Chloe would have apologized. The new Chloe took a slow breath. The account is closed, Dad. I'm not transferring anything. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I could hear my mother wailing in the background. Excuse me? Young lady, you will not speak to me in that tone. That money was for family expenses. Was it? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Was the $250 dinner at the Oak Room on Tuesday a family expense? Were Sarah's $120 highlights last week a family expense? I have the statements right here, Dad. For 5 years. I've been funding your lifestyle while you all look down on me for being broke. The irony is almost beautiful. His spluttering was incoherent. How dare you? We provided for you. We gave you a roof over your head. When I was a child. I fired back, my calm finally cracking. That was your job. My job is to provide for my children, and I will not do it by bankrolling a family that insults them at the dinner table. Mark told Maya yesterday that her nervous disposition was a shame and that she'd have to rely on her looks. What kind of man says that to a 10-year-old? What kind of grandfather lets it happen? He was joking. You're always so damned sensitive, Chloe. You've never been able to take a joke. And there it was. The foundational mantra of my family. Any hurt I felt was my own fault, a product of my flawed, sensitive nature. It was the gaslight that had kept me trapped for decades. No, Dad, I said, my voice steady again, final. I'm just done taking it. The bank account is closed. I will not be funding any of you anymore. Don't ask me to. If you hang up this phone, Chloe, don't you dare expect anything from this family ever again, he roared, his voice trembling with a fury he could no longer control. Not a dime. Not a place to go for Christmas. Nothing. A wave of such profound, liberating relief washed over me that I almost laughed. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. That sounds perfect. I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I simply pressed the red button and placed it gently on the counter. The silence in my apartment was no longer empty, it was peaceful. It was mine. I looked over at the kids. Maya was watching me, her eyes wide. She had heard my side of the conversation. I walked over and knelt in front of her. Was that Grandpa? She asked. Yes, honey. Was he mad? I took her hands. He was. But that's his problem to manage, not ours. We are a family, you, me, and Leo. And we are going to be just fine. She searched my face for a long moment, looking for the cracks, the uncertainty, the fear. She found none. And then she did something she hadn't done since she was a very little girl. She threw her arms around my neck and buried her face in my shoulder, holding on tight. It wasn't a hug of fear, it was a hug of trust. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. The landslide had collapsed, and for the first time, we were standing in the clear, open space it had left behind. But the fallout was only just beginning. The financial cord had been cut, but the emotional tethers were stronger and more insidious. The next battle wasn't going to be a loud, angry phone call. It was going to be a quiet, manipulative siege. And it would come from the person I least expected. The silence that followed my father's phone call was the most profound and peaceful I had ever experienced. It was as if a constant, low-frequency hum that had filled my life for decades had suddenly been switched off. The kids, sensing the shift, seemed to breathe easier too. The tension that usually clung to them after a family visit was absent. That weekend, we painted their rooms, built a fortress out of blankets in the living room, and ordered enough Chinese takeout to feed a small army. We were building our own kingdom, brick by joyful brick. The first counterattack came not with a shout, but with a whisper. On Monday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. It was a picture of Maya and Leo from 2 summers ago, sitting on her pristine lawn, laughing as they ran through a sprinkler. The caption read, "I miss these happy faces. We all say things we don't mean sometimes, Chloe. Family forgives. Let's have a do-over. Just us girls and the kids for ice cream this week?" It was a masterstroke. It bypassed the money, the anger, my father's ultimatum. It appealed directly to the guilt I was supposed to feel, to the image of the doting grandmother, to my deepest, most programmed instinct, to keep the peace for the sake of the children. The old me would have crumbled, seeing this as an olive branch I was morally obligated to take. But the new me saw the strings attached. I saw the carefully curated photo, the omission of any specific apology for what was said, the gentle pressure of family forgives, a phrase that had always been a weapon used to compel my compliance without requiring their accountability. I stared at the picture of my laughing children. They were happy in that photo because they were unaware of the subtle judgments waiting for them as they grew older. They were happy because they were still too young to understand that their worth in that family was conditional. I would not lead them back into that gilded cage. I typed a reply, my fingers steady. They are happy faces. We're creating more of those memories on our own right now. Ice cream isn't a good idea. I hope you have a good week, Mom. I didn't block her. I left the line open, a silent testament to my position. The response was immediate. 3 dancing dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a single line came through, I see. Your father was right. You've become very cold. And there it was. The narrative was already being rewritten. I wasn't a woman setting boundaries, I was a cold, heartless daughter. It was a label designed to inflict shame. Strangely, it didn't. It felt like a badge of honor. The next salvo arrived via my sister-in-law, Sarah. Her text was a masterpiece of passive aggression, disguised as casual concern. Sarah, Tuesday, 10:15 a.m. Hey, just heard about the big blow-up. So sorry I wasn't there to mediate. You know how the boys can be. Listen, I'm not taking sides, but freezing everyone out is a bit extreme, don't you think? Mark is just worried about your mom. She's really hurting. Maybe just unpause the account or whatever you did. For her sake? I scrolled up in our message history. There, from 6 months ago, was a plea from her. Her designer handbag, a status symbol she needed for a charity gala, had been damaged by a leak in her closet. Her homeowner's insurance had a high deductible, and she'd hate to bother Mark with it, he's so stressed with work. Could she possibly borrow $1,200? Just for a month, until some stocks vested. I'd sent it, of course. The stocks had apparently never vested, and the bag, I noticed from her Instagram, had been replaced with a newer, more expensive model. The audacity was staggering. She was living in a house my money had helped maintain, asking me to resume funding the very people who despised me, all while sitting on a debt she had no intention of repaying. The fog of family obligation had lifted, and in its place was the stark reality of transactional relationships. I didn't reply to her text. Instead, I opened a money transfer app. I filed a formal request for $1,200 to Sarah, with a note in the memo line, for the bag repair. As per our agreement. I set the due date for that same day. The reaction was faster and more venomous than I had anticipated. My phone rang within 60 seconds. Are you fucking kidding me, Chloe? Sarah's voice was a razor blade, all pretense of sisterly concern gone. You're requesting money from me right now? After you've thrown your entire family into chaos. I'm collecting on a debt, Sarah, I said calmly. The chaos is a separate issue. One I didn't start. You are unbelievable. After everything your family has done for you? We took you in after the divorce. We've supported you. You've judged me, I corrected her, my voice cold. There's a difference. And the $1,200 is still due today. She hung up on me. 10 minutes later, my phone chimed. A notification from the banking app. The transfer was complete. No message, no apology. Just the cold, hard settlement of a debt. It felt better than any hollow family gathering ever had. It was justice. This, however, seemed to be the final straw. My isolation and newfound backbone were a threat that could no longer be ignored. The following evening, as I was reading to Leo before bed, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole, and my blood ran cold. It was my mother. And she was alone. This was unprecedented. She never went anywhere alone. My father always drove, he was always there to be the heavy. Her coming here, by herself, was a calculated emotional maneuver. I considered not answering, but I knew that would only fuel their narrative of my callousness. I had to face this. I had to hold the line. I opened the door. Mom. She looked smaller, standing on my welcome mat. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Chloe, may I come in? Please? We need to talk. I stepped aside, letting her into the home she had always subtly criticized. She looked around, her eyes taking in the lived-in comfort, the toys scattered near the sofa, the kids' artwork taped to the walls, the faint smell of mac and cheese. It was the antithesis of her sterile, museum-like house. The children, she asked, her voice soft. In bed. She nodded, wringing her hands. Chloe, this has gone on long enough. This. Silence. This punishment. We're your family. This isn't punishment, Mom, I said, crossing my arms. It's self-preservation. What did we do that was so terrible? The question was so genuine, so utterly devoid of self-awareness, that it took my breath away. She truly didn't know. The insults, the condescension, the financial exploitation, it was all just normal family interaction to her. Mark told Maya her personality was a flaw and she'd have to rely on her looks, I said, my voice trembling with the effort to keep it steady. You agreed with him. In front of her. You looked at my daughter and confirmed her deepest fear, that she wasn't good enough. My mother waved a dismissive hand. Oh, for heaven's sake, that's just how Mark talks. He didn't mean anything by it. You're being so dramatic, Chloe. You always take everything so personally. The old record was playing, but I was no longer listening. And the money, Mom? For years, you've all been spending my money while treating me like a financial failure. Do you have any idea what I could have done for Maya and Leo with that money? Her face hardened. That was a family account. We all contributed. Did you? I asked, locking eyes with her. Did Mark? Or did I just subsidize your lives so you could all pretend I was the one who couldn't keep it together? The mask of the wounded mother finally slipped. Her eyes narrowed. We helped you when you had nothing. That money was a small repayment for everything we've done for you. For the shame you brought on this family with your failed marriage. The words hung in the air, ugly and final. There it was. The truth I had always known but had never heard spoken aloud. I was an investment that had yielded poor returns, and my continued funding was the interest I owed on their initial disappointment. I felt something settle inside me. A door, long left ajar, finally clicked shut. I think you should leave, Mom. Chloe. No, I said, my voice firm, absolute. You don't get to come into my home and call my children and my life a shame. You don't get to treat me like a debtor for the crime of needing my family after my husband left me. I am done. We are done. She stared at me, her face a mixture of shock and fury. For a moment, I saw the woman she really was beneath the carefully applied makeup and the designer sweater, a woman terrified of losing control. If I walk out that door, Chloe, that's it. You will be alone. I've been alone in this family for a long time, I replied softly. At least this way, I'll have peace. She left without another word. I closed the door, leaning against it, my heart hammering against my ribs. I expected to feel a wave of grief, of loss. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt light. Unburdened. The final thread had been cut. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. It was over. The war was won not with a bang, but with a closed door and a silent heart. I made pancakes, the scent of cinnamon and vanilla filling our small apartment with a sense of unwavering normalcy. My phone buzzed. It was an email notification. The subject line made my breath catch, estate planning documents, Robert and Evelyn Dawson. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was from my father's lawyer. The email was cold and formal, stating that pursuant to our estrangement, I was hereby formally notified that I had been removed as a beneficiary from my parents' will and all associated trusts. I was to have no further claim on the family estate. I read the words again and again. This was meant to be the ultimate punishment, the final, brutal severance. This was my father's way of making it legal, of etching my excommunication in stone. And I started to laugh. It was a quiet laugh at first, then it grew, bubbling up from a place of pure, unadulterated relief. They had done it. They had given me the one thing I truly needed, a clean break. They had taken themselves out of my life and my future, and in doing so, had given me the greatest gift imaginable, my freedom. I was finally, irrevocably, free. The cage door was open, and I had been the one to walk out of it long before they'd even thought to lock it. The story they had written for me was over. Mine was just beginning. The email from the lawyer should have felt like a gut punch. It was designed to be the final, crushing blow, the ultimate proof of my exile. Instead, it felt like someone had handed me the key to a prison I'd already walked out of. I printed it out, a single, crisp sheet of paper that legally absolved me of any future obligation or expectation. I filed it away in a folder I labeled closure, and then I made hot chocolate for the kids, the rich, sweet scent of far more potent truth than any legal document. The first few weeks were a study in quiet deprogramming. I had to unlearn a lifetime of conditioning. The instinct to check the family group chat, the twinge of anxiety every time my phone rang, the hollow feeling on Sundays that traditionally belonged to strained family dinners, they were all phantom limbs, aching for a presence that had been toxic. But with each passing day, the ache lessened, replaced by a burgeoning sense of peace. I used the money I was no longer siphoning to my family to enroll Maya in an art class she'd been eyeing for months. Seeing her come home, her fingers stained with clay and her eyes alight with a pride that had nothing to do with anyone's approval, was a balm to my soul. For Leo, it was Saturday morning soccer in the park. He wasn't the most athletic kid, but he ran with a pure, unself-conscious joy that had often been stifled by Mark's competitive comparisons. We established our own rituals. Friday night was pizza and a movie night. Sunday morning was for pancakes and long, rambling walks, our little trio exploring neighborhoods we'd never seen, free from a schedule or a critical audience. Our home was no longer just a place to live, it was a sanctuary, its walls echoing with laughter instead of tension. The outside world, of course, hadn't vanished. The tendrils of my old life tried to reach back in. A mutual friend casually mentioned she'd run into my mother, who had sighed dramatically and said, "We just don't know what we did to make Chloe hate us so much. We pray for her and those poor children every day." The narrative was being carefully crafted for public consumption. I was the unstable, ungrateful daughter, and they were the long-suffering saints. It stung, but it no longer had the power to derail me. I had the receipts, both literal and emotional. I had the spreadsheet of financial transactions and the indelible memory of my mother's words in my own living room. My truth was no longer negotiable. The most unexpected development came about 2 months after the Thanksgiving. I was at the grocery store, wrestling a giant bag of dog food into my cart. We'd adopted a scruffy, cheerful terrier mix from the shelter, a final, definitive step in building our family, when a familiar, gravelly voice called my name. "Chloe Dawson. Is that you?" I turned to see my Uncle Frank, my father's older brother. He was a man of few words, a retired carpenter with hands like weathered leather and eyes that had always held a quiet kindness. We'd never been close. He was the black sheep who'd left the city decades ago for a quiet life upstate, away from what he called the family circus. "Uncle Frank," I said, genuinely surprised. "Hi." He looked me over, then glanced into my cart, taking in the dog food, the vibrant fruits and vegetables, the box of dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. A slow smile spread across his face. "You look good, kid. You look solid." It was the greatest compliment I'd ever received. "Thank you. I feel it." He nodded, his eyes knowing. Heard there was some kind of shake-up. He didn't need to specify. The family gossip network, even at a distance, was efficient. "You could say that," I replied, bracing for the usual lecture about forgiveness. He just grunted. "Your father called me. Wanted me to talk some sense into you. Said you'd cut them off, caused a bunch of drama." He looked me straight in the eye. I told him I was fresh out of sense, and that from what I could piece together, you just stopped setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Told him he should try it sometime. Tears pricked my eyes, not of sadness, but of profound validation. Someone from the outside, someone from his own generation, saw it. "They took me out of the will," I said, the statement feeling less like a confession and more like a simple fact. Frank let out a short, sharp bark of laughter that turned a few heads in the cereal aisle. Good. That's not a punishment, Chloe. That's a get-out-of-jail-free card. That money was never anything but a leash. Now you're off it. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a slightly bent business card. It was for a local furniture restoration workshop. That's my place. If you and the kids ever want to get out of the city for a weekend, you come see me. We'll feed the ducks and you can teach that boy how to swing a hammer without hitting his thumb. No strings. I took the card, holding it like a talisman. It was a connection, but not the kind I was used to. It was an offer, not a demand. A choice, not an obligation. I didn't go that weekend, but I kept the card on my fridge, a small, tangible promise of a different kind of family, one built on choice rather than chance. Winter melted into a tentative spring. One Saturday, we were at the park. Maya was on a blanket, sketching, while Leo and the dog chased each other in dizzying circles. I sat on a bench, a book unopened in my lap, simply watching them. The sun was warm on my face. I wasn't thinking about my parents, or Mark, or Sarah. I was just present. My phone, face up on the bench beside me, lit up. It was a text from Sarah. I hadn't heard from her in months. The preview line read, "Chloe, I know it's been a while, but I really need to talk to you. It's about Mom." A year ago, that message would have sent a jolt of anxiety through my system. I would have dropped everything, my heart pounding, prepared to rush to whatever crisis had befallen them. Now, I felt nothing but a distant, weary calm. I knew what it was. It wasn't about Mom. It was about another bill, another problem, another mess that required a quiet, financial solution. I was no longer their solution. I picked up the phone. I didn't read the rest of the message. I didn't block her. I simply deleted it. Then I turned my phone face down and returned my gaze to my children. Leo, breathless and red-cheeked, ran up to me and collapsed in a heap at my feet, the dog licking his face enthusiastically. Maya looked up from her sketchpad and smiled at me, a real, easy, unguarded smile. "This is a good day, Mom," she said. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The nervous hunch in her shoulders was gone. Her eyes were clear and bright. She was thriving in the silence we had created. "Yes, baby," I said, my voice thick with an emotion so pure it almost hurt. "It is." This was the real inheritance. Not money, not property, not a name. It was this, the unshakable knowledge that we were enough. It was the peace that settled in your bones when you stopped begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for you and built your own, more beautiful and welcoming than you ever could have imagined. The story of Chloe, the broken one, the family disappointment, was over. It had been a fiction all along. My story, our story, was just beginning, and it was written in the language of quiet mornings, of unburdened laughter, of a freedom so profound it had become the very air we breathed. We were free. And we were, finally, home.